powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, this is Football at 4.
And Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Get your game on at Galleries Bar, Book, and Games in Ocean Casino Resort. We're there every Monday. You can cheers your favorite drinks while cheering on your favorite team. Go to the Gallery in Ocean Casino Resort. Go for the win. For more info, visit theoceanac.com. Must be 21 or older to play. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Geoff Mosher from Inside the Birds podcast and InsideTheBirds.com is here as we take a look at another edition of Football at 4. The Washington Commanders are in town on Monday Night Football. What's this Washington Commanders team look like? What does this Eagles team look like coming out of a Thursday night game? Let's bring Geoff Mosher in to the conversation and see what he's got on his mind today. What's going on, Geoff?
Hey, Mike, how are you?
Hey, we take a look at this Commanders game, and I bring this up in the beginning because we just saw Buffalo, a double-digit favorite. Now, they were on the road. They played a Jets team that might be a little bit better than this Commanders team, but they're comparable probably. Good defenses, struggle at the quarterback position. This is just a game you look at on Monday night and think, this could be a stub-your-toe type of game.
Yeah, I think after you saw them
It looks like we
stubbed their toe for a half. Looking at that team that you think that say that again?
We lost you for a second, but you're back. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I'm just saying, like, any team from here on out, as you go undefeated, you're going to look at and say there's a chance if they're playing well and the Eagles aren't playing well, that there's an opportunity to stub their toe. Obviously, Washington has played a lot better over the last 4 weeks than they did in the first 5. They were 1-4, and now in the last 4 weeks, they're 3. It's not just the schedule. They are making adjustments, which has helped them.
And I'm not sure. We're having a little bit of I don't know if it's on my end or your end. We're having a little bit of a connection issue on the video side of things. But Geoff Mosher with us here from InsideTheBirds.com. And I want to kind of get thoughts on, this time of the year, you get deeper and deeper. You can stub your toe at any time. But I guess you take a look at this Washington team and where they're strong, the defensive line. They got a really good defensive line. That's supposed to be the Eagles' strength, though, their offensive line. So this is a good test to kind of find out the validity of where that offensive line and how sustainable their line is. Because I bring this up because last year they ran the ball really well for most of the year. And then when they got into the playoffs, they didn't run the ball that well against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But do we think if that's the case this year, are they more equipped to run the ball if they need to in that kind of situation? Or are they as good as a running team as maybe we think they are?
I think so. I mean, certainly the evidence suggests they are. There have been a couple of games this year where you've just seen a little bit of instability. And then, like the Jacksonville game, that's just one example. And they decided to say, all right, the weather's bad. Our offense isn't great. Let's run the ball. They've ran the ball really well. And you've seen that in stretches this year at times where they've just decided for one reason or another that, whether it's a lead in the second half or just what they do from like the Arizona fourth quarter, same thing. I mean, they've ran the ball really well when they've wanted to run the ball this year. And I think the really interesting part of that, Mike, is that they've ran the ball really well without Jalen Hurts having to be their, quote, lead rusher or the main design of their offensive running game. He's only averaging 3.7 yards per carry this year. That's way down from last year. And he's just not had the type of explosive runs this year that he did have last year because they've really been a different kind of running team. They run with their running backs more now.
They do. And the last couple of weeks, though, they have not run with their quarterback as much. Any theory or reasoning in your mind why that is? Why Jalen Hurts hasn't had a takeoff or isn't running? Is that them telling him not to? Is it circumstance? What do you see in this Eagles offense as to why Hurts hasn't needed to run as much or isn't running as much?
I see Dallas Goedert going for 100 yards against the Texans, who play a lot of cover 2. I see A.J. Brown going for 3 touchdowns and 155 yards, again for giving up a ton of air yards going into the game. I saw a Dallas game where, again, there was ball spread around. Devontae Smith had a touchdown. A.J. Brown had a touchdown. I see a better quarterback as far as ball and great matchups that he has throwing the ball against some defenses that have areas where they've exploited. They just haven't had to be. We talked about this in the offseason. They were not going to be a run-first team like they were in the second half of last year. They were going to open up the offense and see if Jalen Hurts could prove that he could do it, and he's more than proved so far that he can do it.
In your mind, who does Hurts have the best rhythm with right now? Is it Hurts Goddard? Is it Hurts Brown? Does it matter? I don't know. I mean, do you think the Eagles right now are comfortable with the distribution in the offense?
I think it depends on what look he's getting. I think, again, when you see a team playing a lot of your, cover 3 zone or cover 2, like the Texans, and the underneath or the hole is open, then you see Goddard having his bigger games. Plus, the tight end screens have been really lethal for the team this year. When you see a team try to get up on the wide receiver a little bit, play a little bit more man on third down, then he knows he has a great connection and an opening with A.J. Brown, who's a great man beater. And honestly, I guess the guy he's least connecting with, just as of late, is Devontae Smith. But nobody would ever be surprised if Devontae Smith just kind of shows up and has a 100-yard and a touchdown type game effort, especially with Washington Monday night. That was the game that I believe that Devontae had all sorts of crazy catches and yards and touchdowns the first time around.
You look at defensively, and they're going to play a Washington team that Tyler Heineke limited. They don't really have that. McLaurin's, I don't know, he's not a number one guy, but he's given them problems in the past. But they don't have that flashy offense. But if you're looking at this Washington team, what concerns you about them as you saw Philly defensively against a much more limited Houston team?
The big concern against Washington is that they've redefined their offense. With Taylor Heineke, at least, they've been running the ball a lot more effectively over the last 4 games. That's why they're 3-1. They had 128 rushing yards. They had 166 rushing yards. They've had 137 rushing yards in their last game. So in their last 4 games, they're averaging about 131 rushing yards. If you compare that to their first 5 games when they were 1-4, they were averaging 97 rushing yards. And honestly, that number was inflated by having a 142-yard game. They had one game where they only rushed for 43 total yards and 3 others where they were under 90. So to me, what they've done, Mike, is they figured out they had a little bit of a difficulty once Brian Robinson came back, figuring out what to do with Antonio Gibson. And now they figured out you can use both of them. You see Brian Robinson being used on first and second down. He's a running back, and Antonio Gibson and the ability to run. And they've kind of worked those 2 guys in tandem. And it's only a concern against the Eagles now because the Eagles gave up a lot of rushing yards against the Houston Texans last Thursday night. And it's been an area that they've been able to compensate for throughout the first 8 weeks. But eventually sometimes you run into a team that can move the ball a little bit better than the Texans do, and that can run the ball like that. And then you'll have to see if the Eagles can continue to keep up their pace of scoring and make it a one-dimensional game.
Yeah, that's the one thing is, the last time Philadelphia, I thought, they benefit. You benefit from Wentz in that game, right? He did not have a good game. He had all the fumble problems. How Heineke changes their offense. Do you see any change in their offense from the quarterback?
Probably in just that he doesn't think Wentz, they were coming out trying to throw. They were trying to use, Jahan Dotson was healthy for the first 3 or 4 weeks, and they had Samuel and Dotson and McLaurin. I think they won one of their first 2 games, and they had scored a decent amount of points and probably got a little bit pass happy. And, they had Carson. They probably felt that they could do a little bit more downfield vertical with Carson. Offensive line was obviously a stress, and Carson didn't play great in every single game. But now, sometimes this happens. We see this, I guess, with the Eagles when Nick Foles would come in, after winning the Super Bowl, where you have to change some things around a little bit. And again, they're not trying to say Taylor Heineke, go out, be Carson Wentz, go throw the ball over the field. They're playing a more conservative style offense, but that's working for them.
Yeah, and you go back to that first game, the one thing, remember, Philadelphia, they had a shutout going. They gave up a touchdown with under 2 minutes left in the game, I think is
Right.
you essentially had a shutout for the full game here. You wonder how much their offense has evolved. Wentz had a terrible game. He was 25 of 43, and they really shut everything down. Gibson, 12 carries, 38 yards, but McLaurin was the guy. He had 6 for 102. You wonder how much better their offense is now. But then again, the defense, and let's get into that a little bit. I want to get your thoughts on the evolution of what we're seeing more now from Javon Hargrave. Why has he been a bigger part of, or more productive, I guess, in terms of numbers, if that means you're more productive?
So Javon Hargrave himself said recently that part of the reason for his breakout, I think he has 5 sacks over the last 2 games, is that he's finally healthy. And it was weird because it was, he's played in every game. And it made us reflect back to training camp. He missed almost all training camp with what they called a toe injury. You have to assume that was turf toe because he was out for quite a long time. Now, he was not on the injury report when the season started, but maybe it's a case where he wasn't getting treatment anymore. It was healthy, but it's still hard to go out there and play, even if it's bothering you a little bit. And Jason Avant, or was it Trey Thomas? One of those two, I think maybe it was Trey Thomas, was talking about how difficult it is when you have turf toe for any athlete, but especially when you're a 300-pound athlete and all that weight on a toe. So I'm going to interpret from Javon Hargrave that he was still, in some way inhibited by it for the first few weeks, and he's feeling a lot better now, and everything's working, and he's been able to have that explosion off the ball for a few weeks.
Yeah. You mentioned the fact that I think it's 5 sacks, I think you said, the last couple of weeks. And the one area, though, they're getting sacks on that spot. What about against the run? What have we seen without Jordan Davis? I know it was only 1 week, but do they have to change something in these weeks without Jordan Davis? Is Hargrave and Cox something they're going to have to change their roles up that maybe they don't want to do? Or what are we looking at here without Jordan Davis against the run the next couple of weeks?
It's a good question. I think there's got to be some changes, and there has to be some sort of schematic changes. I think there has to be some mentality changes by the linemen and the defense overall. If you talk about schematic changes, obviously, if you're going to play the 5-man front, you don't have Jordan Davis. You need somebody who can line up over the nose tackle. Over the center as a nose, and the most logical person would be Javon Hargrave to do that because he did it a little bit with the Steelers. But even he is not a natural nose tackle. I mean, he's been much better as a 3 technique here, or a 5. I mean, a guy lining up over the guard with the Eagles and getting to the quarterback. So there might be some sort of personnel change there because they tried a couple of different guys in that nose tackle spot against the Texans and it didn't work. But I don't think just lining up, a half a foot somewhere on the defensive line is going to just magically make them better. I mean, Javon Hargrave, for all that he gives you in pass rush, he gets pushed back in double teams. So does Fletcher Cox. And those guys sometimes don't and sometimes do. So either the guys who are blocking them are sometimes better or sometimes worse, or you have a combination of sometimes those guys bring it and sometimes they don't, which I think the answer is both of that happens. So the guys up front have to take more ownership. Stop trying to get to the quarterback on the way to the ball, or get to the ball carrier on the way to the quarterback. That was a Jim Schwartz scheme. This is not that scheme. When you're asked a 2-gap, you got a 2-gap. But secondarily to that, when the running backs do get into the second level, it would be nice if C.J. Gardner-Johnson or another defensive back would do more than, as Jason Avant said, poke a chicken wing out there. Like you're just throwing your elbow at a guy thinking that that's going to tackle him. It doesn't work that way. This is the Jekyll and the Jekyll and Hyde of the Eagles defense. They take the ball away very well, a lot. So whatever they give up, they wind up taking away eventually.
And they're not a great tackling team, but that's because they're very good in coverage. Guys like Slay and Bradbury are not good tacklers. The safeties are not in the box run-stopping safeties. They're safeties, so you're not seeing teams hit you with the big play over the top, so you're going to give up some bigger runs. Are you willing to give up bigger runs in the short term, these next 4 weeks or so, without Jordan Davis? And getting Jordan Davis back doesn't fix all your issues against the run. You're not a good tackling team.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Right? You're not a good tackling team. So a 4 or 5 yard run sometimes could bust into a 14 or 15 yard run because your corners are not great tacklers, but they're really good in pass defense. Same with your safeties.
Yeah, yeah. So, by the way, thanks for bringing that up because the Eagles were allowing almost 5.2 yards per carry when Jordan Davis was healthy and playing. So it's not like they were some fanatical or great run defense, even with Jordan Davis on the field. And Jordan Davis only plays like 20 snaps a game. So like the idea that one man is going to change the entire defense or was even changing it to begin with is a little bit insane to think. But I don't know. As a coach, if I'm a coach, Mike, and I think you do this too when you coach baseball, I coach softball, right? You want your players to take what they're not great at and at least try to improve upon it. So I understand that they're a smaller defense and they are built for coverage. Kaiser White's built for coverage. Slay's built for coverage. But when a running back's coming, you have to at least try to make that tackle. You have to do a better job, in my opinion. And as a coach, I think they demand this too, to do more than just stick your elbow out, right? Because any touchdown in any game could be the game-winning touchdown that sends you to a loss. So while I would say that it's not what they're best at, it doesn't give them a free pass to just say, here you go, Dameon Pierce, there's the end zone. I'm just going to let you go right by, and there were some really, if I'm being honest, piss poor tackling attempts in that game that I think you would expect more.
And I guess
from
one thing we wonder, Moshe, is
mm-hmm.
is that a byproduct of the time? And we always say be aware of time and score. Is the effort based on time and score? In other words, if you're in a playoff game and that tackle matters, are you going to make that tackle, or are you going to give the old ole BS in that spot?
That's a good point. That's a good question because you can make the argument, you can get away with it in the regular season.
Right.
I mean,
I'm playing the Texans. I'm playing the Texans. We're up 2 scores. I don't really need to sacrifice my body on this particular play on Thursday Night Football in a game where we're 7-0. This tackle is not the difference between us winning and losing a game.
Yeah, but I would say if you get into making those kind of business decisions on a 17-week basis, week after week after week, because you're doing well, then you're going to probably fall into that habit. And all of a sudden you're in a playoff game.
Yes.
And are you feeling that juice to make that tackle, or are you going to rely on what you've been doing for 17 weeks?
Yeah.
So that's why I said from a coaching standpoint, and good coaches never let the bad things go, even in a win. I am positive that they were in the meeting rooms, whenever they came back from this Texans game, looking at the poor tackling attempt, saying, we can do better than this. We should do better than this.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think if you look at some of the things, if you were to stack up the things that they need to improve, and they're 8-0, what are we looking at? We're nitpicking. No, we're not nitpicking. We're finding things that to go from 8-0 to a solid regular season to be a successful playoff team. What do I need to fix?
Mm-hmm.
We need to stop the run better. You got to be a better tackling team. Those two things have to happen in the playoffs. Otherwise, you're going to be disappointed. You might have a great 15-2 season, but if you can't tackle and stop the run, you're getting bounced.
Right. And again, we're not suggesting that the Eagles have to be the top 5 run defense. It's just more about the effort and you just have to be better than what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
Or else that could come back to haunt you.
Moshe, you guys do a film study. You did the pod. You can check it out, Inside the Birds. They really break down a lot. But, we saw, who was it on Thursday night? Jerry Hughes having a nice day, man. Getting to the quarterback. They had sacks. They caused fumbles. Mailata gave up 2 sacks. They blitzed a lot there, but is this a concern against this Washington team? I don't think the Eagles' offensive line is a concern, but against this Washington team, is the Eagles' offensive line a little bit of a concern against this Washington team, the matchup?
Certainly, because if you remember the first time around, the Eagles really had a tough time in the second half, especially putting points on the board, building off the first half momentum, and Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen was a big part of that. They gave him a lot of trouble in the middle. And Washington's actually now, Mike, it's kind of funny. It's a league of if you can't beat them, join them, right? Copycat league. They're playing a lot of 5-man fronts now, which they weren't doing earlier in the year. So they're kind of sort of taking, and they got rid of William Jackson because they felt like he just was not equipped to play the zone. He'd proven he was not much of a zone corner. And they like to play zone. So yeah, they're playing a lot of 5-man fronts and doing that, what the Eagles and a lot of other teams do now. So now you're not going to be able to get a whole lot of double teams in that running game unless you're going to come out in 12 personnel with an extra tight end on the field. which maybe they will. We'll see. But, the Washington defense is playing better, and Chase Young, I believe, he'll be active into the window, or he already has. He may get out there and play a little bit. So it's not that I'm predicting doom and gloom here. I'm just saying this is a good Washington defense that has given them issues at times for the last 3 years in individual parts of games. Eagles have won a lot of the last 2 years, but at some point when this team's playing well, they have good defensive personnel, and I do think they pose a threat to the Eagles offense.
Should be interesting to see how this one goes down. Monday Night Football is back right here on 97.3 ESPN, and of course you can hear that game on Monday night here at 7 o'clock is the coverage. 8:15 is the kickoff and the coverage with Mel Reese and Mike Quick. Inside the Birds podcast, Inside the Birds pregame show. When are you guys going pregame for Monday Night Football?
5 o'clock p.m., 5 to 7 o'clock. Myself, Adam, Jason Avant, and Trey Thomas going to pinch hit there for Greg Cosell on Monday night.
Okay, and check out the Q&A show. It was pretty fun this week to listen to Avant and Quentin Michael kind of break down their thoughts on where this Eagles team is through 8 weeks into the season. Actually 9 because they've had a bye already. Interesting, they had the Thursday night game. Now they have the Monday night game. They don't go back to it. They have like an extra day. They're out of their routine here for a week. We get another Sunday with no football, no Eagles football.
Yes, I know. It felt like they played. Well, they did play 2 games in 4 days, but it feels like they're now playing 4 games in like 21 days because of the bye and then the 11-day stretch here. So,
all right, Andrew's here tomorrow. He'll give us the matchups in this one to watch out for. Adams on Friday. Moshe will be back to preview the Eagles on Monday as Monday Night Football. Moshe, appreciate it, bud.
Take care.
All right, there's Geoff Mosher here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN.